Do you struggle picking the right typeface for your project? Are you really curious about the best ways to get the best font for what you're trying to do? In fact, there are so many choices out there, too many fonts available, that it can be really difficult to differentiate, which one I should use and which one I shouldn't. Hint, hint, don't use Papyrus. Don't use Comic Sans. All right, here we go. So, what is your type? How do you know which one to pick? Which one is going to really do what you want it to? If you haven't seen them, check out Ellie Cordova's video. She's really funny. She's got some great personalities, and she plays it up really funny with the different typefaces in these little internal conversations. Really funny. But she kind of gets into this idea that each typeface has a personality, and they do. First question you need to ask yourself is, what are you trying to say? Why do we need to know that? Because the message is what matters. There's a really classic phrase that David Carson used to use about typeface, which is don't mistake legibility for communication. So communicating with your audience is what you want to do, but don't assume that just because they can read it, the correct message is coming through. So that message is also based on the visual style of the typeface. So if you look at a really cool typeface like this, what is it saying? To me, it's saying something futuristic. It's saying something um, mechanical because it has these rounded edges and these thick lines. It's out of the ordinary, so it feels special and unique. So it would be used on a special and unique project. It's surprising, but it also feels like it's something more modern because it's has limited shapes and they're more geometric in nature. This one, on the other hand, is handwritten, so it feels really casual and friendly, right? Think about that. What is the style that you're trying to emphasize, and does that font support the style? If it doesn't, then pick something else. And if it's a boring and average font, you never need to use a boring and average font anymore. We have too many choices to just settle for the boring and the average. That being said, know a little bit of your history. So there are some big type categories out there based on the history of fonts. Hieroglyphics, understand hieroglyphics. This is true. You know, typefaces are literally read as letters, but our language communicates a lot like hieroglyphics do, which is they symbolize something. So what does the font symbolize? What does it look like? So if you pick a Helvetica or a font based on Helvetica, you're saying something about your design style. You want something to be really crisp and clean and modern, quote unquote, that you like white space and you like spread out design. That's simple design. That's what you're saying. Or if you pick a more traditional typeface from the Garamond or the Times New Roman and that kind of a family, a serif font, you're saying something else. You might be saying something more traditional, something a little bit old-fashioned, something more like legible, whatever. You're trying to say something more simple. So pick the font based on the category as well, and respect that history because those typefaces came from a place. They were designed by a designer. They have a context that people recognize when they see them. And so that's going to carry through into how people evaluate what they're reading and what they're seeing and what you design. Think about type density. I'm your density. How much space is there around the font? Is it big, thick, and bold and fill up the entire page so it's just like yelling at you? Or is it light and airy and friendly? What are you trying to say? What is the context, the positive and negative space, the background, the foreground? How much of the page do you see? How dense is it? Really plays into a lot of what that font does. So a lot of times you pick these big, bold fonts, people think you're yelling. Something light and airy feels kind of expensive and elegant. So pay attention to leading, to letter spacing, to line spacing, all those things as you arrange that typeface, because that also emphasizes your message. And if it's, you know, a little bit too tight or a little bit too loose, it doesn't work. Got to get it just right. Respect type hierarchy. Respect my authority. Yes, really, you need to pay attention to the dominance that the font has on the page. That's why we have these different styles: light, medium, bold. They really help emphasize certain things on the page. And so use that to your advantage. So when you have a title or a bold font that needs to catch attention, you're going to use a bolder, thicker typeface. If you have something that's lighter and less important, it can be secondary, so it's going to be thinner and lighter. So pay attention to that contrast. There is that contrast between large and small, medium and tiny, dense and light, and so on. Pay attention to that as you use and pick those fonts, especially when pairing your font with a picture. Think about how they work together. Next one, limit your palette. That seems a little odd, but no, the same principle applies to typefaces as applies to art. Limit your colors. Don't just assume that you can use every color in the rainbow. No, it's better to design and control and to be very strategic about your color, but also the font you choose. Also, when pairing them together, you want to pick only a few to go together. You don't want to have just like a dozen different typefaces on a page. That's going to be confusing and busy and ugly. Instead, you want to think about opposites and which opposites go together. Maybe a thick, bold font goes along with a light, thin font, or maybe a sans serif font goes with a handwritten font. The two of those together create a really cool combination, a nice pair. And so think about that as you pair up your fonts, select just a few to work together. Too many becomes too confusing. Less is more. That's a very famous phrase, and that works very well with type. Now, here's another thought. Really be selective about which font you put with which font. So why is, Palm Beach on the left different than Palm Beach on the right? Well, the one on the left seems more cutesy and curly and cartoony, whereas the other feels like it's written with a brush. So that might make it a little more upscale, a little more, thoughtful, as opposed to the other one, which seems a little corny and too friendly and too childlike. All right, so pay attention to those choices and plan ahead. A lot of times, designers I know, they have like a couple dozen of their favorite fonts and they know which ones they like the best and the combinations that they think work together best, and they just use them that way, and that's the best way to go. So plan ahead and think about those combinations, and that will help you. All right. So at the very least, the takeaway from this video is to think about the message you're trying to convey. What are you trying to communicate? And does the type you choose support that message? Does the style of the font, does the way it looks, does the way you arrange it, does the way you style it and color it emphasize and support the message, or does it contradict it? If it's contradictory and it just feels like it doesn't match, then it won't work. And people won't, well, they're not going to hate it. Who hates whatever? They're just not going to respond to it. All right. Hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to improve your typefaces, your typeface selections. If you want to learn more, check out my videos and some of my other lessons that I have available down below, and see you around.